The video you're about to see is a very, very important interview. I did it back in 1980, in June of 1980, with Antony Sutton. And of course, Antony had been a scholar at the Hoover Institute for really many, many years. And while he was there, he wrote the 3 volumes of Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development. He wrote his book, National Suicide, and these books went into the background of the funding of the Soviet Union from its inception, and of course his book, National Suicide, went into the fact that America was financing the Soviet Union all during the Vietnam War, while the Soviet Union was financing the North Vietnamese who were killing our boys in South Vietnam. In fact, everything was done to prevent Professor Sutton from either publishing the 3rd volume of Western Technology or his book National Suicide. Tremendous pressure was brought to bear on his publisher so that National Suicide could not be brought out, so the American people were not to know that during the Vietnam War we were financing indirectly the North Vietnamese. Well, let me just show you a few of the books that Professor Sutton has written, and these would include, of course, the Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, Wall Street and FDR, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, and of course National Suicide. He's probably written at least 10 other books, including The Federal Reserve Conspiracy, the Trilateralists over Washington, volumes 1 and 2. He's written extensively on the Skull and Bone Society, on gold, on diamonds. Certainly Antony Sutton is one of the finest writers that we have within the conservative movement today. And for the last 20 years, he hasn't been doing interviews. I've contacted him a number of times, asked him to do radio interviews with me, but he is unavailable. I think that you're going to find that this interview will explain to you who it was who financed Adolf Hitler and gave him the capability of waging war against the West, who it was who financed the Bolshevik movement after it was established in 1917 and kept it going until the Berlin Wall came down in 1989. You're going to learn about the Trilateral Commission. You're going to learn about who controls the media in the United States. Indeed, who is the invisible government and what the ultimate goal of that invisible government is, and why that invisible government financed Adolf Hitler and finances communism and has financed communism since its inception. And now to Antony Sutton. Dr. Sutton, you wrote 3 series of books while you were a research fellow at the Hoover Institute. Can you give me basically the background of the content of these series?
Yes, the series I wrote at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University concerned the transfers of Western technology to the Soviet Union, and essentially comprised 3 individual books. Each book covers a period of time since 1917.
And then you wrote a second series of books on Wall Street.
Yes, these were trade books. In other words, they're not academic books. They're written for the general public. They concerned the build-up of the 3 types of socialism: Bolshevik socialism in Russia, what we might call welfare socialism in the United States, and Hitlerian or National Socialism. And each book examines the financing and the contributions made by Wall Street, by international bankers, to the development of that specific form of socialism.
Now, in your research and analysis, and your efforts to bring out the facts about what was going on in our society, did you encounter any effort to discourage you, to prevent you from bringing out the background of America's involvement in the financing of international communism?
Yes, very definitely. For example, when I was at the Hoover Institution, in 1972, I went to Miami Beach to give some testimony before the Republican National Committee. And although a congressman had hand-delivered to the wire services this testimony, which was later printed, the wire services refused to transmit it to the newspapers. Then when I got back to the Hoover Institution in California, I was called into the office of the director, and I was told in no uncertain terms not to make any more speeches like that, and that this information should not be made public.
This was the information that we were giving the Soviet Union the technology to develop its war potential?
Oh yes, at that time we were in Vietnam, and as you know, the Soviets were supplying the North Vietnamese.
This was 1972.
1972, yes. And for example, I knew that the Gorky plant, which was built by the Ford Motor Company, but the Gorky plant in Russia produces the Gaz series of vehicles. The Gaz vehicles had been seen on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We were supplying equipment to the Gorky plant in the middle of the Vietnamese War, and these trucks were being used to carry ammunition supplies, which were killing Americans. Now, I thought this was morally wrong, and I said so in Miami Beach and at the Hoover Institution. And it was this type of information that was suppressed.
And so what eventually happened as far as your activities at the Hoover Institution were concerned?
Well, I didn't pay much heed to the warnings. I published a book called National Suicide in the following year, which summarized our assistance to the Soviets, our military assistance to the Soviets. And when that book came out, again, there was great pressure to stop the book. There was pressure on both the publishers and me personally. And I felt I couldn't take this, and a few years later I just left the Hoover Institution. Since 1975 I've been an independent author without any ties whatsoever.
Let's go a little bit into the background of the financing of the German war machine that we fought in the period 1941 to 1945. Could we start first of all with the original financing of Hitler between 1922 and 1923 when he was first making his effort to come into prominence in Germany?
The original financing of Hitler, that's in the years 1922, came only partly from Germany. One of the most prominent Americans concerned with financing Hitler was Henry Ford. In fact, Henry Ford received a medal in 1938 for his assistance to the early Nazi Party. Then, of course, Hitler had his attempted push in 1923. He went to jail, and then we began another era in the rise of Hitler.
Right, and of course he eventually came to power in 1933 by the electoral process. What about the financing of Hitler's electoral activities in 1933?
This I can trace. I have traced it very exactly. I discovered amongst the Nuremberg records a series of bank transfer slips to the Doppelbruck-Schickler Bank in Berlin to an account which was under the control of Rudolf Hess. And this was the fund that was used to finance Hitler's access to power in March 1973. And amongst the corporations that transferred money to Hitler, I find not only R.G. Fabian, which is quite widely known, but also German General Electric, AEG, which is under the control of General Electric in the United States, or was at that time, and companies like Osram and...
Now, what was the tie-in between Osram and General Electric?
The tie-in was a share tie-in. International General Electric in the United States had controlling interest in German General Electric, and also through share interlocks, a controlling interest in Osram in Germany.
So then we have Ford and we have General Electric helping to finance Adolf Hitler's rise to power. Were any other large American corporations involved?
Very definitely. Standard Oil, through its technical association with I.G. Fabian. For example, Germany could not have gone to war in 1939 without tetraethyl. You need tetraethyl to raise the octane value of aviation gasoline. Germany had no means of doing that. This was developed in the ethyl laboratories in the United States and transferred